I teach at NYU ITP, and one of the taglines of the school is the center of the recently possible. So I'm trying to frame future now, recently possible. What can we do with the technology that we've got in our hands right now? We just haven't yet imagined it, what we can do with it quite yet. How can we play with it? How can we see? So let's take to the moment. We actually aren't at the point where we have access to all of the data, but I want us to imagine what would happen if we could, both positive, utopia, and dystopia. So the rise of the open data movement really started not from startups, but from government. The UK government, starting with The Guardian, asking for open data sets in how the UK government spent money. The US government followed suit, Australia, something about the English-speaking world and governments and open data. That seems to be where it started. And while trying to push this movement to the startup community, particularly with health tech and environmental tech, which has been kind of a hard uphill battle, we've actually seen big corporates doing more work to make their data sets open and available for open science efforts and healthcare, for open patent commons and things like this. But like open data specifically has been a hard push. We haven't yet seen the like awesome case studies of incredible commercialization happen at a wide scale, despite releasing treasure troves of data onto the world. We've seen this happen, but we haven't, like where can you point to an awesome startup that themselves have fully deployed based on open data sets? So I want us to think about it a little bit differently, which is not what can you do with your government's open data, but what you can contribute forming your startup. So I sit at an intersection where I see a ton of startups. I teach at a school that creates lots of startups. I've run a bunch of competitions in healthcare and government, looking at thousands of startups in healthcare. I've been an angel investor, and I'm doing a startup myself now. And I always come to that slide in the deck, in the investor deck, in the big pitch dream deck that says we're going to hang on to this data that we're going to amass, that we're going to capture for some future monetizable revenue stream. We don't even know what that is yet. We just know we're going to hang on to it. And that always gets me kind of sad. Maybe because everything I've built, I've tried to build something bigger, and it ultimately winded up as ad tech. How many of you have done that before? Oh, all right, sister. But also because there could be so much more potential. We're going to try to imagine what that potential could be. Oh, part of the problem with this whole movement is it's not really a movement yet. We don't yet wear open data bands around our arms like Livestrong. There's no rock stars yet, other than Tim Berners-Lee, who's at the Open Data Institute in the UK. And the kinds of things that open data people get excited about are, like articles in The Guardian, white papers distributed, things like this, and government forums. And we need to have a little bit more kind of sexy foot stomping at startup festivals like this.
We need John Oliver on the case.
Yeah, we totally need John Oliver on the case. Okay, let's get him on the case. The other problem is the short-sighted startup problem that I mentioned. I'm making fun of the wearables right now, just coming after Rob. But like, how many of these things do you have in your own life where you wish you could just have pure, just simple data accessibility? Forget about open data and publicly sourcing data, but just being able to move your data from one app to the other, connect one wearable to the other. And really, are we going to have to rely on like Apple and Samsung to make sense of all these data sets? How many of you guys have ever worn more than one wearable and noticed that everybody has a different version of how much you might have walked today? I've got this problem. Moves thinks I cycle around New York. They just don't know how fast we move there. And we're hanging on to this data for what end? As we see the cost of capturing data go down to an infinitesimal level, as we see that the potential value of data follow a similar trajectory, what are we losing? What are we missing out by keeping it trapped away? What is the value of data in a complex adaptive system of emergent outcomes? And I go forward. Yes. And will we have a winner-take-all tech culture? That's the thing I'm most interested in, is all of the companies that have kind of won in the last few rounds of tech, I started out as like a semiconductor analyst in my early 20s. So I saw that wave, and then the era where like Microsoft and Intel took 96% of the market cap at one point. And now, thank you, Bottleman, now we have Google and Facebook, who are really good at figuring out what to do with their own data. In the future, when the data is open and free, will we see that winner-take-all system? Is that like a natural formation from nature we just see in startup world, or will we all be able to participate and create our own mini profit-making ecosystems on top of what we create? What happens when n equals all? So I'm talking about open data. I'm talking about all of the data in science, all of the data in companies, everything that we produce, everything that we create being available to us right now. The wonders of that and the horrors of that. So first, what is possible? I'm going to take a moment. I'm glad this is in an open-air environment. We're not in some dark tent, because I'm about to jump off a big precipice, something I've never done before, and show you a slide without a background image. Please jump with me. Okay, so let's just put it in the frame of reference. You guys are all, I would say, actually only 50% of you startup people, but maybe I should do that poll again. So when n equals all, how many of you have like worked on a business plan or just an investor deck, and you're like desperate to get a source of data, but you find out that it's hidden away on JSTOR, motherfucking JSTOR, or worse, it's like $6,000 to get some kind of like industry thing on like the hardware device you're trying to disrupt. How many of you been there? Anybody? Okay, so like imagine that you're just able to just like go grab that shit. You're able to go get it. It's there for you. You're able to not have that as like this big thing in front of you. You're able to know the answer. Just imagine what that's like, and imagine that you're part of contributing to that with whatever you create. Can we see that world happening? Maybe. Okay. All right, that was a selfish, like, what would be possible. Let's get a little bit more social impact. Okay, what happens when we level the playing field in schools? Been spending a lot of time, more volunteer basis in New York City, on all of the incredible education startups, working with the New York City Department of Ed's innovation team to see how we accelerate the practice of startup people going into understand parents and principals and teachers, and starting to see these amazing technologies come to bear that make Common Core look like not just an inevitability, but like what the hell would happen if we actually gave these objects to kids who didn't have the same access to education, but could, on their own time, increase their vocabularies, learn math in their own way of learning, and we could track their progress. So they had that like moment in time where I was a parent shark at the New York City, education night. We were looking at some startups. They're like, wouldn't it be cool if your kid could take a test on a Monday, and by Friday you could know how your kid was doing? That was incredible, an incredible way to think. Right now that stuff is trapped away in stores. I can't ever see it. I don't know. I know the teacher sees it. I don't get the answer until, sometime like later in the year. So imagine what that's like. If I can see that data, if parents everywhere could see that data, and we come up with a way for us all to kind of pick up the kids that get lost in the system. When n equals all, can you imagine that we like never graduate? That whatever that thing you got printed, how many of you guys went and graduated university? Everybody here? Not everybody. Okay. What if we were in a situation where it didn't really matter that you went to Harvard Business School? What mattered was what you learned this past year or in the past 20 years. That we could track not just if you succeeded or failed, but what you gathered from that experience. And that you could, for your own edification, know that your education never ended. That every year of your life, you're supposed to be both taking something down and contributing back to what we're learning. How can we see that our world is different if we actually have all of that information available? Something that's really excited me is what would happen if products could tell you where they are from. How many guys have heard of Bruce Sterling's book, Shaping Things? Tends to be a very nobody awesome. Okay, best book. I think I can even get it for free on the internets. Bruce Sterling, awesome sci-fi writer, talks about the future when products can tell you where they're from. He talks about a wine bottle that tells you where you're from. And wouldn't it be awesome if you could hold something in your hand and the little Arduino inside of it could be hooked up to something that could tell you, this is how I was made. This is who made me. This is where I came from. These are the trade routes I passed to come to you today. And we weren't just relying on some eco-certification or some like marketing website that told you the corporate social responsibility intentions of the company that made it. But you could actually see where it came from. Take this even farther, that Spimes idea even farther. We know about the history of the land on the farm that grew a tree that gave us the apple we hold in our hand. I'm married to a Dutchman. I have a Dutch daughter. And so yes, thank you. Yes, yesterday was hard. I'm glad I was in that tent with the music that was like totally asynchronous with the experience. It took the sadness off. I was glad to be with you all while that happened. And I'm sorry to miss the Dutch-Brazilian match right now, but it's not quite the match I envisioned, so I'm happy to be here with you. I really am. But the Dutch government, that's where I was going, has done some amazing work with ALSAT imagery, collecting open data sets, contributing back open data sets, showing land use changes. So now you can look at that apple and see where it's from, and not just what parcel of land in the Netherlands that apple came from. The Dutch, by the way, produce most of Europe's plants, more producer of agriculture than any other country in Europe. You can not only see where that apple's from, but you can see what that land produced the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that, which is very important if you're trying to eat organic vegetables, non-genetically modified organisms, to know what the land was doing the last time you checked. And N equals all when we donate our health and life data by default. Informed consent is something that was talked about earlier as having really kind of been technologically disrupted in a way I don't think we expected. I don't think we expected that when we asked people to give their data to health, to science, that we couldn't promise that data would be protected because it's part of systems like Facebook, like Twitter, like Google, that aren't necessarily themselves in control of how that data is used. But thinking about that from an alternate standpoint, what would happen if we just lived our lives that way, completely open book, contributing all of our data? Would we live differently? Would we tell lies? What would become secret? And N equals all when we design for we rather than me, the quantified us rather than the quantified self. Thinking about the way human beings connect to each other, specifically all these amazing systems that get you to obsessively track your data. What if we thought about it differently? About getting the family around you, your community of care, encouraging you and supporting you, rather than just giving you that obsessive beep when you met your 10,000 steps. So all of these things are more possible if we think of the world that way. Okay, but I'm going to get on to the thing we love to talk about, what is terrifying. That's the stuff that we spend the most time on right now. I think there's a lot of internet intelligentsia types that have been around at this for 20 years that were extreme optimists until sometime around about a year ago, and the year and a half before that, when the Snowden leaks started happening, when we realized that we weren't actually manifesting necessarily a better, more optimistic outcome, when you couldn't just point to Arab Spring and a growth curve going north and saying that we're all becoming more free, more democratic because of all this internet technology around us, when we actually thought, well, maybe these things we've created could be used for horror. So in the same way that that positive visualization, what's that called? I'm going to think positively about the future and what I can create. There's the equal and opposite negative visualization where we say, what is the worst possible thing that we can happen so that we could make sure that we're putting the constraints in right now as creators. So if N equals all, if we really have all of the data everywhere at all time, do the data rich get richer? Is there this future possible job of the data consigliere? So if I'm a member of the 1%, I've got someone following me around to help me interpret all the data that's out there because it's TMI, it's overwhelming. We're not necessarily designing systems for ease of use. Do people that have connection and access experience the services that our government has delivered, or do we even have a chance to succeed if we're living in a rural area or the 20% of Africa that hasn't yet gotten mobile access? If N equals all with no opt-out, will dissidents be hunted? We know that's happening right now. We know and have seen so many examples where The opposite of what was intended is happening throughout not just the rest of the world, but in North America as well. And this concept of the right to not be sensed is almost impossible to fulfill if you're a technology creator. If n equals all, will we read minds? There's this great example from Tyler Cowen, The Great Stagnation, where he talks about in the future you'll go on a date, and you might be able to go into the bathroom during your date, and you'll be able to check, based on all of the sensors on your date, was he smiling at me? Was that smile genuine? Was his heart racing? Is he really all that interested? This is kind of both terrifying, yes, mostly terrifying, if we're able to read minds and read hearts in this way. This is something that when n equals all, we'll have to make determinations of what aspects of ourselves we want revealed and what aspects keep private. And n equals all, the ungoogleable, will we be shunned if we make ourselves not open and available to the Google masses? How many of you guys have tried to find someone on Google and they're just not there? Okay, yeah, what happened? It was kind of weird, right? Yeah, okay. I did this for a friend of mine who was going on a blind date, and we couldn't find the guy. He had a common Irish name, but we really couldn't find him, and I'm pretty good at finding people. Finally realized he's a lawyer, maybe he pays someone to not be here, and maybe she should think differently about that first date.
I live with the guy now.
You live with the guy? Okay, you're gonna have to come up here later and tell us your story. How do you choose not to shun him? So I'm going to ask rather than comments or questions, this is the time where you get to come up and give a comment, not a question. Tell me what you see, positive, negative about the world of open data, what you want to manifest as a startup. Because startups manifest the future. We talk about these emergent outcomes of technology. I've seen the creators of large-scale systems like Facebook, like Twitter say, oh, we just make this stuff. What the world does with it is the world's decision to make. But we know perfectly well that we kind of sit behind the controls and we make feature and functionality decisions, data platform decisions that drive behavior at a grand scale. So what decisions can we make? What will your startup contribute when n equals all? Yeah, Leah?
So I really love the idea of what if we could all just give our health data right away. But it made me realize, having worked in data mining and predictive models before, I know how valuable that stuff is. And if only people really understood that you can take away identifiers. I think it would take as much education of the public to understand how your privacy is protected as it would in being able to promote this as a general rule. That you can, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest fears it's been, is the re-identification of that data. But you're saying if people just understood how possible that is, I like that.
Hi, I'm wondering what your thoughts are. This is a great presentation. It's a lot of what if. But how do you feel about the feasibility of actually eventually reaching a stage where we will have access to open data when right now the model is very much based on privacy of personal information, like with the ECJ ruling in Europe that there's a right to privacy on the internet, or also based on ownership with patents, or on control with trade secrets. It seems a bit at odds with the way things are right now. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think. Okay, this is working. I think there's a whole, I would say, a small group of people in the health science community that point to the fact that our understanding of privacy is historical anomaly. That it's something that happened really when we started moving around en masse and migrating en masse and moving away from communities into cities and thinking of our lives as something that not everybody knew everything about. And so I don't necessarily share that view because we've now had 100-something years of this concept of privacy. It's going to be a hard thing to undo. So I think it's a matter of recognizing and exposing the controls of what that data is. And I'm really looking forward to startups that take a more proactive stance with how they share those decision rights with their end customers, how they inform consent, and how they allow the levers of being able to turn off the sensing when that's what you want in your life. Oh, okay.
Hi, I'm Michael Lensner. I missed the first couple of minutes, I think. I apologize. This is what my company does. We pull in open data about the nonprofit sector from different government sources and the tax authority here in Canada, and we sell it back to nonprofits. So like everything you're talking about, everything I heard, where there's a social impact from it and you can make money off it, and create solutions for government on it and sell it back to government. All that stuff is stuff that we definitely do. So
Awesome.
I'm happy to hear you talking about it. It's great.
Yeah, and you guys have started something else, like a nonprofit where you then encourage nonprofits to contribute data sets.
We're encouraging, promoting this. So we're called Aja, and then there's Powered by Data.
Yeah.
And Powered by Data is encouraging holders of data about nonprofits to publish that data in open formats, both so our company can use it, but also so that everyone else can take a whack at it as well. So yeah.
Yeah, tremendous.
Thanks.
We actually would have data about where our dollars go when we give them to a nonprofit. Amazing work.
You described the institution you represent. It sounds like it has a unique role in the educational ecosystem. Can you describe a little bit more about the educational institution, please?
So it's at NYU ITP. Those of you that have heard of ITP, it's a school that it's been around for 30-something years. It's an engineering school and an art school. It's a school where Foursquare was started as a student thesis project called Dodgeball. So it became famous actually amongst investors for that emergent outcome. But there's a lot of incredible like hardware and software and social media startups that have come out of there. And really it's a school where the encouragement of making is the primary value, the encouragement of collaboration as well. ITP, ITP in NYU. Interactive telecommunications programs, like how we can use technology differently when it's in our hands. Sure. All right, are we all ready? Any more? All right, first one to get to the drinks gets them for free, right? All right, thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Jen.